Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. Usually on Mondays we kick off a new theme, but we actually started a pretty big theme last week. We're checking out bands who have changed singers, picking two of the singers at least, and exploring one song from each of them. Last week we checked out Black Sabbath and The Ocean. We're going to kick off this week with Genesis. Normally we would do one song today and one song tomorrow, but due to the oddity of putting these into a week and having them groups of two, but having a week only have 5 days, today we're going to be looking at both of the Genesis tracks. Today kicking it off with right now kicking it off with something from Peter Gabriel. Later on today looking at something from Phil Collins. Now, Peter Gabriel, I know what he sounds like. I know what Phil Collins sounds like too, but I definitely know what Peter Gabriel sounds like in Genesis. We've listened to stuff from this band before, and we've listened to something from this album, the 1973 Selling England by the Pound. We've checked out the Battle of Epping Forest, and I think Firth of Fifth, although I can't find a reaction to that, so maybe that was during a live stream. We're going to be checking out the title track off of this one, though, Dancing with the Moonlit Knight, where night is spelled with a K, as if it's the profession night, not the evening night. Let's dive into this, see what's going on with Genesis.
Can you tell me where my country lies? Said the unicorn to his true love's eyes. It lies with me, cried the queen of maybe. For her merchandise, he traded in his prize.
A little bit of a poppy folk rock thing.
Cried a voice in the crowd. Old man dies, the note he left was signed Old Father Thames. It seems he's drowned.
I love the staccato sound of both of these instruments combined. Just this constant eighth note movement from both of them in totally different directions and melodies.
Time goes by. It's the time of your life. Easy now. Sit you down. Chewing through your wimpy dreams.
And of course Peter just has gorgeous voice for this. Those little rolls, what is that even on? It's such a muted tone, a metallic tone. It almost sounds like the drummer was rolling on like a cymbal stand.
Young man says you are what you eat well. Old man says
I couldn't tell if we were speeding up or not. The guitarist definitely has rushed a couple of times on that faster, that run right there. It's a fun cross-stick beat on the drums. The organs on the side, I really like that. So it's still 4/4, but that was a very unwieldy rhythmic pattern, creating some interesting pockets of space at the end of the phrase. I like that movement. A little bit of Hall of the Mountain King in there.
There's a fat old lady outside the saloon, laying out the credit card. She plays for tune. The deck is uneven
That space,
right from the start.
just a burst. I like that. There's still the reverb in it. It isn't pure silence, but it's this feeling of sitting on the edge, waiting for something to happen. Texture layering with the guitar playing, what the vocalist is singing. Really big reverb on that tom. Like a synth trying to, probably a synthesizer trying to sound like a sitar. Interesting sound there. I'm loving that drumming. The bass kick syncopations against the snare. Really nice two-handed ghost notes there on that decrescendo. It's a very interesting story they're taking me through on this. Light and ethereal, sometimes dreamlike, oftentimes heavy, full of anxiety. There's an anger in here, but a beauty as well, passion maybe. There's also the folky sections, like the intro to the song, and these flute lines kind of have a little bit of a folk melodic quality to them. And the past and present merging, love and hate merging, finding the space between dualities. Is that what this is about? Also, constant eighth notes with sharply plucked staccato tones. That's exactly how the song started, too, bringing it full circle. There's definitely some interesting patterns in here that could be interpreted in narrative ways or thematic ways in order to try to tie some of the musical ideas together. I'll be completely honest though, as usual with Genesis, it kind of goes over my head a little bit. 8 minutes and they decide to put in, there's like 9 or 10 sections in here. Granted, we do return back to ideas frequently as well, especially in the middle third, I would say. The beginning was rather linear, the ending was fairly linear too, as we wrap the song up back to the intro sound there, minus We were minus another instrument, though. There were two plucked string instruments at the beginning. I think one of them is actually on the synthesizer, but we only had the guitar here to wrap the song up. So we actually returned to something and lost half of it along the way. That's interesting, too. It carries some of that peacefulness, but we're alone now, where previously we weren't. Like I said, there's a lot of patterns on this. I'm sure I'm not going to scratch the surface of what this song is doing. You could probably dive pretty deep into this, which is also pretty typical of Genesis. I feel like most of their music has a lot of depth to it, and in fact, it has been a bit of a contentious point with me on reactions where it's just really difficult for me to understand what they're saying on a first time, and it ends up kind of being a bit frustrating for me. Single track listens, that's not too big of a deal, but a couple tracks in a row, and it's really difficult to lose the plot, and once you do that, you're lost permanently. Genesis really requires multiple listens from at least what I've heard from them. Maybe they have some simpler tracks. I just don't get those. So this is densely composed, I think I'm going to call it. Not necessarily densely layered. There are some sections that have a lot of parts going off at the same time, but generally speaking, they cram a lot of unique sections into comparatively a short amount of time. Most other bands would decide to put 9 to 10 sections in a 16-minute song and really have more space dedicated to them. Genesis just blows right through them. We did that for 8 bars. Let's move on to something else. And they just seem to have no problem quickly shifting between ideas. Another interesting thing to look at is that the first 3 or 4 sections feel nothing like the stuff we get in the middle. It's a very poppy folk rock vibe at the beginning, very palatable, chill, relaxed, laid back even. Almost as soon as Peter stops singing, though, and we get into the instrumental bits, these are driving, high energy, more complex musically. When you start listening to the drums, when you start listening to the guitar work, these are they have more complex lines. The ideas are more densely layered. It becomes wild to keep up with. I think this is another pattern you can look at is the movement from lower energy to higher energy and wrapping the song back up on lower energy, creating a bit of a bell curve for intensity on this track. What would that represent? And I'm probably going to say that a couple of times. Usually in these analyses, I will present a bunch of patterns or observations, and at the end, I'll tell you my take on that. My understanding of the musical narrative. I don't have one here. I see the patterns. I want to know what they mean because I'm having a tough time putting it all together. And as usual, maybe I read the lyrics and that's where things begin to make sense. I have some sort of linguistic direction to help me understand what the music is aiming for. That doesn't always happen though. And Genesis is kind of hit and miss with me on that too, which is really interesting because they're a band that seems to soundtrack their sections. The lyrics will sing about this, so the music will represent that. And when the lyrical themes shift, the music will shift too, almost as if the music is background to a narrative, a poem of some sort. And yet I still kind of have difficulty finding lyrical and musical cohesion with some tracks of theirs. I'm going to put that one on me, though. Once again, Genesis, they're just kind of difficult to get on that first chime. I think I do pretty good, though. But, I miss a lot. That's for sure. I think anybody would. But yeah, we have this nice folky pop rock kind of thing. I don't know what order to combine those words. It is folk, it is rock, it is pop. It feels digestible like pop rock, but it also feels like folk rock. I don't know if I'd call it pop folk, but it's these terms all like smashed together, and I love it. The atmosphere is gorgeous. I love the The rigid, harsh plucked strings here, I think that creates a very specific mood. The vocals are smooth. I can just listen to this all day. Peter's got a fantastic voice to begin with, but here I think he really leans into a softness of voice, smoothness of delivery too. I've heard the dude belt. He's got pipes. He can be loud and commanding, and just powerhouse frontman for a band. 100%. He's got that sound. He doesn't even need stage presence. His voice does it for him. But that's not what he does here. And honestly, I think at least for this section, it's exactly what I would want from him. Smoother, a little quieter. It feels more personal. We're not belting out some notes. We're not screaming about anything. It's just something that feels small. When we pair that with the less instrumentation and the calmer composition, like I mentioned, there's just two instruments playing constant eighth notes. That's it. That's like the whole intro of the song. They're doing their own things entirely. As far as melody and pitch goes, the two instruments I think are just off in their own worlds, but they're following this consistent rhythmic pattern. We eventually add another melodic instrument that plays 16th notes. I think it is a guitar. Y'all can correct me on that. But we have these pockets of faster notes that come in against the eighths. I thought that was a really nice way to create a little bit of rhythmic syncopation, of having an accented part of this phrase, not by louder playing, not by changing the volume or an accent or anything like that, but speeding up parts, bringing extra attention to a specific beat because there's 4 notes played in that beat rather than 2. The drums eventually come in. It begins to build. We have to build. Out of this, though, there's a flurry of sections. I don't necessarily remember every single one in the correct order that we saw them, especially since it wasn't totally linear, and we sometimes double backed and looped or repeated a section from prior, bringing it back now, and it's just, I don't think we ever heard any section more than twice, though. The initial time and then the callback, and that was it. We never had a third time through on anything, which that in and of itself is pretty interesting too. It allows for callbacks without ever feeling cyclical. It still feels very linear. But many of these sections dance between two worlds, a sort of poppier kind of rock with palatable melody lines, strong bass work, solid drum work, usually not too expressive is not the right word, not usually too complex, but still expressive in the ornamental ideas. Not just sitting on a standard rock beat, but sometimes throwing in some syncopation or a little cymbal hit here and there to spice things up. I'm still really curious about that one thing he did. I think it was in the second or third section. It's just a very muted metallic hit. It doesn't sound like he's using mallets. It definitely sounds wooden, so he's probably using drumsticks against some sort of metal that doesn't vibrate. And it's like a clacking sound. And as far as I would say, he's hitting a drum stand. The long neck part of the cymbal stand, or maybe the snare stand or something like that. Maybe there's an instrument that captures that sound that I'm not aware of, but that's where my brain went first. A very rigid piece of metal hitting it with wood. And I love that. I really do. First of all, it's just a great sound for that section. I believe we were starting to wind things down, reduce some of the layers, bring the intensity back down from a larger rock section into a softer moment. So it really works to help this stay crescendo, this reduction of intensity. But it also shows me that the drummer, probably Phil Collins, I don't know who was drumming on this, but I know Phil was their drummer for most of Genesis. I don't know. That this person uses all of their kit. And I love seeing this because as a drummer, your job is to hit stuff. I don't care if you're playing the kit, I don't care if you're playing timpanis or marimba or whatever, a giant concert bass drum. Your job is to take things and hit other things, which means that everything you can hit is an instrument. I really like seeing this creativity. Now, granted, hitting a cymbal stand, that's not exactly entirely fresh. Even back in 1973, this was just something that people have been doing for a long time. But the thing is that he thought about it. There is no such thing as a part of the kit that isn't an instrument. Every single thing in your drum kit is an instrument, not just the drums themselves. And to see people think outside the box like that, even if it isn't very experimental, it's still outside of the norm box. I like to see that. To me, that indicates a good drummer. And yeah, that stood out to me. Even though it's like two beats total out of the entire song. I'm like, that's the point where I really knew this drummer knew what he was doing. But the drummer also has some pretty cool ideas throughout here. I praised the syncopation and the ornamentation all throughout this song. I really like the drummer's intuition and how to spice up an idea because the drummer also sat in the pocket a lot here, just laying down a backbeat. I can get behind that too. You show some expressiveness through that. That's solid drumming as well. Um, what else goes on in these sections? Wild guitar work. I mentioned that towards the beginning. I think it was the third section. Maybe there's a fast burst of notes coming out of the guitar before it sort of slows down, and that's the whole riff. A little bit of speed, like eighth notes into a burst of 16th, down to eighth, down to quarter, kind of ramping up speed and then bringing it back down. It almost feels like they were rushing a little bit here at times. I thought actually the section was accelerating tempo wise, but it doesn't, I don't believe. It does create for a bit of a nice burst, though. It's a fun section, and I think a lot of that comes from the guitar. The drums, they're just locking in. The vocals, they're doing their thing, but the guitar, they're creating the energy, the characteristic to this section. And I feel like that's what the guitars do in most of this song. Yeah, sure, certainly there's some memorable riffs in here, but more often than not, I feel like the guitars are driving the song. Not necessarily in a way of trying to be memorable riffy, not necessarily in a way of writing strong melodic lines for the sake of telling a story melodically, but the riffs that they play tend to, it almost feels like they came after most of the song was written, and the thought process was, well, how do I elevate this? How do we take it from a standard rock song? The bass, they're doing their harmonic stuff. The drums, they're laying down the tempo. The vocalists are doing the melody. That's harmony, that's melody, that's rhythm. What's the guitar have left to do then? Elevate it. Turn it from a standard rock idea into a Genesis idea. I don't necessarily know if this is how they wrote this song in particular, but this is what I feel the guitars do most often. They stand out simply because without them, it's just a normal rock section. And I really like that design because usually I feel when I listen to rock, it's very guitar first music. It feels like the riff was written, the drums were set to accompany that, the bass just plays what the guitars did, and then your vocalist, they go off into a room and write some lyrics to sing on top of it. I feel like a lot of rock music is guitar driven, and this doesn't feel that way to me. The guitar feels like the cherry that's put on top of a wonderful sundae. It was already pretty good to begin with, but this just took it to the next level. It feels like the final piece of the puzzle rather than the first. And that's very interesting. I've never made that comment about Genesis before, so maybe it's just how they approached this song. But that absolutely, it works for me. It's a fresh take on guitar writing for me. And I appreciate that from them. Talked about the bass already, talked about the vocals, the drums. I put the synthesizers pretty much in the same area as the guitar, especially since they frequently played similar things to the guitar. They really were two sides of the same coin here. Whether they are pairing up to play the same melody line, either with harmony or texture layering, or if they're playing the same rhythm in different directions or something like that, they're usually frequently working together to help elevate the track. There are some interesting production ideas on this, though. This is a stereo mix, I believe, is what it said. 2007 stereo mix. Um, How did this work previously? I don't think this would come up if this wasn't in the title. There is a section in the song where the synthesizer bounces. It's probably an organ. I keep saying synthesizer, it's probably an electric organ. Just retroactively pretend I have said electric organ this whole time. It bounces from side to side. Is this something that was added in the '07 mix? It feels integral to that section. There really isn't anything else going on in that moment. This was like 5 or 6 minutes into the song. It is the star, and the production also, it's a simple organ idea. And like I said, there's nothing else musically going on, so it's not like this was, if this was gone, there would still be something of interest going on. This is the spotlight section of the moment, and a lot of that is the production of it, the rapid panning back and forth. This is something I've heard in plenty of older rock tracks, especially around the time when stereo equipment began to come out and people were experimenting with how to use this expanded sonic field. This probably would have sounded pretty cool back in the day. I mean, it still sounds pretty cool here. It got a chuckle out of me. I wasn't expecting it. Sounds cool. Rule of cool stuff right there. I like it. But if this wasn't added until the '07 stereo mix, and it was mono originally, what was happening in that moment? It feels like without that panning, it's sort of a dull moment in a song that doesn't have dull moments. So if anyone can hit me up with that, maybe this is the '07 mix of the original stereo mix. That's a very weird way to phrase it here, though. You just call it the '07 mix. You don't need to put stereo in it if it was always stereo. So I don't know, that's just a question I have. I was thinking about it while listening to this. Now, I brought up some ideas earlier about feelings and emotions and stuff like that. Duality is something that I feel rather strongly on this. I feel like duality comes up with a lot when I talk about Genesis. Part of it may just be coincidence. They play songs that have a lot of parts in them just by statistics alone. If they're going to be changing emotions, you're generally going to find opposing emotions in there somewhere. There are a lot of emotions in here. There is laid back, chill, uh, even I'd say carefree at times. There's passionate love or passionate sort of pride maybe in the song, but there's also anger. There's a lot of tension in here. Some of the heavier parts that really feel like they were approaching a sort of, I don't know if it would be proto metal, because I think 73. Was Black Sabbath doing their thing yet? Anyways, something metal like. Definitely still rock. Maybe a hard rock, especially if you want to call it by 1970 standard. Um, but some of the really heavier sections in here with the large bassy guitar tones, those come off as rather aggressive compared to now. Of course, not really, but for the time, especially when you compare it to the other sounds in the song, take those moments and compare it to the beginning of the song, which kind of has a little bit of like a whimsy to it in places, very laid back, charming. Then you get to these comparatively angsty, loud, aggressive moments. That's a big swing. That's a big swing. And there's anger in there, but there's also tension. It also leads to a darker sound in lighter sections, which creates to me a bit of sadness or sorrow. We have laid back, we have happy, we have pride, we have anger, tense, anxiety, we have sorrow. This song touches on everything. And it does so rapidly. This is probably not how it's meant to be read, and maybe it makes more sense once I hit the lyrics, but musically, we are swinging through emotions wildly. It is, it is kind of jarring in the long run. Granted, from moment to moment, I don't think the swings are that wide, but when you really look at the gist of the song overall, it goes through ideas rather rapidly. I'm curious where all of this comes from. I like the multifaceted approach to the storytelling, where each individual section tends to highlight a specific emotion or idea or atmosphere, and then collectively they will showcase a multifaceted approach to whatever the topic is. I don't know what Dancing with the Moonlit Knight even is supposed to mean. I mean, the concept of dancing with a knight at night, that, like, I get that, but I highly doubt that's what it's about. It's probably a bit more metaphorical. But whatever's happening here, this person is very conflicted about. Or whatever they're singing about, they're very conflicted about. And I can hear a lot of that in the music. Like I said, it's a nice ride. We start low, bring it up high, and bring it back down, and we've lost something at the end, even if we've come full circle. I really like to see some of these ideas showing up in the lyrics. So let's dive into those. See what Peter's singing about today. All right. Massive shout out to all of the people who add annotations to this on genius.com, because there's a lot of older things going on here, but also a lot of very British things going on here. And basically, I would not have any idea what most of what's going on here is happening without some help. This seems to be a song, though, about watching your country kind of get pushed into a future you're not too excited about. And that future in this case seems to be capitalism. He's seeing a lot more greed on display than he's ever seen before. And so he uses local characters, maybe. There's the Queen of May in here, which I did not know who it is. Old Father Thames, I also did not know what that is. And using these in ways to show the death of the old ways. Instead of the Queen of May, we now have the Queen of Maybe, selling merchandise, and he sees the people around him buying that merchandise, getting rid of their old traditions, and moving into this new idea of consumerism and consumption. He says that there's a paper. He reads it. There's a note that an old man dies. Old Father Thames. Seems he drowned. I would not have understood any of this, but apparently Old Father Thames is a bit of a guardian and patron of some places in I don't know. It just says of a particular place. Does it say traditional old cities? London. There we go. London has several statues of Old Father Thames. He seems to be a Poseidon-like figure, and he in Thames is a river. He seems to be a patron of the river. It's interesting then that it's described that he drowned, the irony of being a patron of a river and drowning in it. But he says that Old Father Thames has drowned as England is being sold by the pound. So the old ways, the old traditions, the culture of the area is gone. It's being destroyed so that it could be sold piece by piece by the pound, like you would go out buying meat by the pound or cheese by the pound. Um, but also the British pound, money right there, bringing in the monetary element to it. It talks about citizens of hope and glory. This is another thing that would have went over my head, but the land of hope and glory was stated in a patriotic song from 1902 written by Edward Elgar. He calls this place the land of hope and glory. So the citizens here, he goes, time goes by, it's the time of your life. Now this I don't get. It says, chewing through your wimpy dreams, they eat without a sound, digesting England by the pound. I'm not sure what the wimpy dreams is, unless it's simply about, dreams used to be larger, more bombastic, things that you wanted to go out and do, and now it's just like, I dream of owning a car, I dream of owning, the latest whatever, technology of the time and stuff like that. Again, incorporating more consumerist dreams into it. The chorus kicks in Talks about a captain leading a dance, expecting everyone else to follow. This would be about following societal norms. Not necessarily where I would have come to on that, but that is what the annotation states, and it does work really well with everything going on because it's about introducing this new culture and expecting everyone to fall in line with it. It says that they dance throughout the night, following on till the grail sun sets in the mold, and following on till the gold is cold. I like that idea too, where the gold is what everybody would be seeking, monetary wealth. But even when that goes cold, when that's a path not worth going down anymore, that's how long we're going to chase this until it's unobtainable. We do have one more line, one more stanza here in the bridge. It says, "You play the hobby horse, I'll play the fool. We'll tease the bull, riding round diddle loud, loud diddle round." I have no idea what any of this is. Apparently, it's a reference to a song from a play, a traditional English folk play, but they don't go into anything other than that detail wise. So this just ends up being one of those very English things in this song that go right over my head. That's pretty much what a lot of this would have been like without some of the extra annotations. So, again, huge shout out to the people who contribute to genius.com. I do hear some love for the country. I hear some love for the old ways and kind of feeling like they're passing you by. Disdain and disregard for the new ways, and a little bit of anger, maybe, towards the people falling in line with this new culture. As far as stress and anxiety, I don't really see too much of it in the lyrics, but it could also be a fear of being left behind. Not necessarily just that they have a distaste for this new way of living and thinking, but also feeling like they can't be a part of that and no longer being part of society in a way, losing that connection. It's an interesting track. I agree with parts of it. Other parts sound like old man yelling at change. It can certainly be a mix of both. I think it's necessary to be critical of change, but sometimes it could just sound like you're yelling at it too. And in this particular case, I can also understand a change of a massive cultural shift, one towards blind consumerism. I get it. I do. And it does fit with a lot of the emotions. I wonder if the song, if I have the lyrics pulled up with each section, if I can feel the emotion of these words alongside what music is being played there. But as it stands, I think just the general concept of the emotions I felt match here. I also think it's interesting that by the end of the song, we have somebody who was maybe finding their old way. We return back to that folk style of music, that peaceful, idyllic sound, except we're missing one of the instruments now. And I think this is interesting because I originally read it as losing something, but we've actually removed the electronic organ and we're left with the acoustic guitar. We have pushed away the modern sound and have stuck with the classic one, which is really what the song is about, trying to stay with the old ways, the old culture, the old understanding of life. Um, so I think it's intentional that we end the song where we started, minus the electronic aspect. I think it's even an acoustic, like a legit acoustic guitar too, not a clean electric there. Really pushing for that old school sound, and folk. The folk inspirations they're using here are also drawn from older times as well. So I think that all lines up rather well. These are my thoughts. Genesis, Dancing with the Moonlit Knight. What did you think of this? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe you have your own interpretations, perspectives, or opinion on this. Please put all of that in the comment section along with any other thoughts you might have. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. Also, don't forget, I mean, if you've watched up to this point, the other Genesis reaction is already available. The one with, why am I blanking out on his name? The drummer guy. Phil Collins. Yes. The songs Robbery, Assault, and Battery. That's already available to listen to. Go ahead and check that out. We'll do a bit of compare and contrast with Genesis that was at this point in time with Peter on vocals. Alright, that wraps everything up. Remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.